peace. Well, people defend other folks' right to say something, even if they disagree with it, because that's the American way. And these clowns who are off into this sissyism, where they think they should be protected and have no obligation to protect themselves, they want to use systemic power to oppress what people say because they are deeply terrified of what happens if their ideas get put in a fair exchange with other ideas. And the other ideas, let's be candid, they've kind of gotten humanity from cave to condo. So when you fly in the face of that, you come up with something that you jumped off into in 10 or 20 years, well, you have problems. So, as a professor told me 55 years ago at UCLA, a person who actually ran a country's propaganda machine, this woman was a visiting professor. She said America is in grave danger of becoming a fascist nation, not from some jackboot wearing, goose stepping uniform thugs, but from, as she put it, some pink panty wearing, long haired beatniks who hated themselves. They would be glad to impose the worst kind of tyranny to protect what they do and to protect you from yourself. So that looks to have been a very accurate prediction.
Okay, so do you think he will be arrested? And can you break down the charges that he will be allegedly
Hell, I can't think of a single justification from any for anything I've heard, because what he did has been long protected by American law. Remember, we've had this Constitution in effect since 1789 and the Bill of Rights since 1791. So that is 132 years, 232 years we've had these rights. And the Supreme Court has long said that the First Amendment means what it means when you say you have a right to assemble and petition for redress of grievance. They've had that to mean demonstrations, rallies, protests, not just something in writing. They have long said that just because you vigorously advocate a position and you attempt to get a public assembly to promote that position, that does not make you responsible for what somebody independently may do that is violent and against public peace, dignity, and order, who gathers in response to your call, unless you specifically advocate the lawlessness. In other words, we need to go take over the Capitol building and burn it down or whatever, unless you're saying something like that, you cannot be held responsible for what's going on. So it's like what you saw with Bill Cosby. I said from day one, they have violated his Fifth Amendment rights, and this is not going to go anywhere when it gets up to appeal, except, no, you did wrong. But they're going to try to punish this guy, and eventually it's going to dawn on other people that if they can do that to somebody like him, think what they can do to everybody else. Look at the problems you're having right now, I'm having, and other people are having, trying to communicate. And they are blocking these communications because they don't want to deal with the fair exchange of ideas. They want to block anyone from stating the ideas because you know why? That was number 11 in that other thing I sent you, which the Nazis knew 80 some, 90 some years ago. Tell a lie long enough, loud enough, you can get anybody, including the liar, to believe it. And that's what they're trying to do. They want a lopsided presentation of their way, which is not the human way. or at least not for the overwhelming majority of humans. This is not a black-white thing. This is black people, white people, brown people, yellow people being human beings and realizing that the family is the ultimate foundation for humanity that got us from cave to condo. And you've got somebody trying to, quote, be for the destruction of the traditional nuclear family. By the way, that's from Black Lives Matter. That was the first point in their mantra of what we believe that they took down after we attacked it so thoroughly on Twitter and other venues a few years ago. But it is what it is. So be careful. Now, I'm saying I don't know why the hell they're taking him into custody because I can't see in 50 years worth of work in this criminal justice system a single justification except its political oppression, and it is highly dangerous. It is what the Bill of Rights was designed to protect against, which is the use of governmental protection. Now, how do you enforce that? Well, that's where you come into the Second Amendment. It's not just about self defense. It's supposed to provide the citizenry with a defense against an oppressive government. So they're trying to take that down too. Let's go bust in somebody's place. Let's suppress the Fourth Amendment that deals with searches. You saw what they did with Bill Cosby on the Fifth Amendment, which is you have a right to remain silent. They're trying to abrogate that also. So we've got an administration in place that is probably going to be very, very sorry for what they've done, particularly as they set precedents. And there's still Article 2, Section 4 about impeachment. And I will say this as the judge, an experienced trial judge who was presiding over the moot proceedings that Fox had with Hunter Biden's 3, not 1 laptop, and where the technician who serviced these liquid damaged laptops brought in the downloads from those 3 laptops. Somebody ought to be indicted, and that would include the person at the time who was the vice president and his son. And they set the precedent, again, disregarding this precept to be careful what you ask for. And they went after Trump for an impeachment proceeding for the second time when he was no longer holding the office of president. So they can get some pretty substantial evidence on Mr. Biden.
Well,
They are setting the stage for that. So they are making a real live mess.
they meaning the Biden administration and Democrats.
Yes, and what they're doing in New York. And you saw this stuff that Maxine Waters did. You sent me something on YouTube I found interesting because it put it all together. Maxine Waters and Feinstein were pontificating about gloriously, they're going to get him. He's so evil and he did this. So they played what he supposedly did that was so evil. And for the life of me, after 50 years in criminal justice, I couldn't see anything that he said or did wrong. But then this same YouTube thing played some of Maxine Waters' remarks, and she was saying if you see a vehicle, a car with a Trump pent sticker on the back, break the windows out or key the car. If you see a business with one of these posters in there, break the windows and burn it. And this is specific advocacy, solicitation of violence, incitement of riotous behavior, and that is criminal, but nobody's gone after her. Same thing with Feinstein was talking about. We need to take to the streets and show our anger and burn some things like they used to. And see, that becomes actionable, and that is criminal. So, what, sauce for the gander is not sauce for the goose?
Now, are they the charges that they're trying to arrest Trump on has to do with Stormy Daniels and what he paid her, and she was a prostitute at the time.
Yeah, I mean, come on. That's that Bill Cosby stuff. That doesn't even have. See, that's, in other words, you want to take a cheap shot at somebody. Now, the point is if I went back in anybody's life for 55 years, 40 years, 30 years, somebody's going to hear something that would give them justification for calling you a bitch or an asshole. You see,
I am going to.
law
Okay.
in America is, if it ain't bad enough to breach the public peace, leave it alone, because humans will be humans. Now, you want to sit there and go through this whole 9 yards worth of mess. Be careful what you ask for. You might get it.
Right. DeSantis. And guys, if you want to request, you could request now. Because I want to talk about Donald Trump. So I guess, should we talk about the topic and then have people request to comment on the topic, or talk about all the topics and have people come up, or I just have them come up as we're talking as along of the topics, I'm assuming. Anyway, DeSantis, of course, reporters asked him about, the Trump possible arrest, blah, blah, blah. And he was basically saying, the DA, who was who was backed by George Soros, were wrong and is wasting, taxpayers' time, whatever. But then he took a dig at Donald Trump. And what I'm getting on the consensus of everyone on social media, content creators, and even listeners typing, they're basically saying, listen, first of all, this will be more of a win for Donald Trump. He's going to get more supporters. The public is going to side with him and vote for him and support him more if they even try to arrest this man. The more DeSantis try to take these stupid, shady jabs at him, he's going to be looked down upon, and that's going to help Trump even more. So why is he taking subliminal stabs at Donald Trump, knowing that's going to hurt you, even though you haven't announced that you're going to run? But I honestly, I don't think this man is going to be arrested today or tomorrow at all. He's not. Because if you arrest him over some whore, who did sign a NDA at one point, took the money, and now she's being greedy or whatever. But if you're going to arrest him over that, then all the Democrats might as well hang it up, anyone that want to run for a presidency, because you're not going to win. You're not going to win. They did have a protest in New York this morning, which was staged, and that was lock Trump up or whatever. So it was Trumpsters. It was only a dozen people, and I watched it live, and they was out there for an hour. Then said, "Okay, guys, it's time to pack up." So I don't think this man is going to be arrested. Did he even walk in that DA building in Manhattan? Is this more media fluff? Because Donald Trump knows how to work the media. So what are your thoughts on DeSantis? Can you hear me, Judge? I can't hear you. I can't hear you. And I hope it's not me. Actually, let me bring someone in to make sure that it's not me. If you guys could still hear me, put a thumbs up so I know. I'm getting sick of this shit. Okay. So then I think people are trying to call him. So if somebody's calling him, it is going to bounce out.
Nobody called me. I just dropped.
I guess you were saying too much realness. Listen, can y'all please subscribe to my website, therealdananetwork.com? Sign up to the mailing list. because in the summertime, I want to launch it and start doing live streams there. So that way the judge could be 1000% uncensored without all these interruptions. It's the realdananetwork.com. Sign up for the mailing list. All right. I've tried to bring up FBA because he was first, but it looked like he dropped off. So I guess who was next? You was it Tupac?
Well,
or somebody?
Some pending news that did happen. Massive strike has shut down Los Angeles public schools.
Oh yes.
420,000 students who are not in class today.
Yeah, 400,000, right?
420,000.
So what are the parents going to do? They got to take off work. So and then the school board is going to lose money.
Well, yeah, you got the people talking about gun control. They're saying shootings of children nearly doubled during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Ain't trying to make that a black-white issue, but anyway, what are you supposed to do with these fiends out there? I mean, does anybody have any sense when it comes to what humans are like? Why do you think the U.S. has a Department of Defense? The Russians have a Defense Department. The Chinese have one. The Indians, Pakistanis have one. Great Britain has one. France, Germany, Ukraine, everybody's got defense departments, and they arm so that they can be respected for the violence that they can vest, and everybody is polite and diplomatic with each other. That works when you have armed people together.
I don't know if it's my connection or the people who's trying to connect to come up, because it was saying connecting, and then I saw two people drop. But I don't know who was. I think it was either Tupac or Mr. Engagement, or either one of y'all could go first. I don't know which one. I think it was Tupac.
You can let Tupac go.
Okay, so Tupac, Mr. Engagement, and
Ain't
then
no
UFO.
biggie.
I think UFO was the last one.
You missed the pun.
I love the pun. I love the
it's
pun.
no biggie. How cute.
Tupac ain't no biggie. That was glory. Hey, what's up, Joe? It's good to hear you guys talking about this. I had a quick question for you. I don't know if it's too off topic, but that point you made about armed people tend to be civil towards each other, I find that to be very true. And there's a utopian kind of ideal or a utopian world that I feel like the media kind of presents for people to kind of like wish they lived in, even though the reality is that humans are human. And I think that question you asked, like, does anybody know what humans are like anymore? I think that's a really apt question. A good question. My other point was like, I had a question for you, Joe, about like the media seems to be largely spitting out one side of the eye, right? They seem to always echo those ideals and those kind of like messages. And we have this situation where like, all these people protesting and all like the Trump thing. It reminds me of all the different things that have not come true, that the media has espoused and said would come true. I feel like they fill their followers and the liberals up with a bunch of like hope that their aggression, their goals will be fulfilled soon. And so like I can't tell you how many people in my timeline over the past couple of days have been just celebrating the arrest of Trump. And I'm curious, like, when that doesn't happen, if that doesn't happen, why is it that the media then just moves on and the liberals just move on as if nothing was ever proven wrong or as if they were never wrong? I feel like if they were to remember these things and just kind of take stock of how many of these false hope things they've experienced, like from Russiagate on and probably further back and all that stuff, like, do you think like the media has a hand in wiping the memory of these failures?
They count on the public having a short memory. In American politics, the memory of the American public is rated at about 2 years. In other words, if it happened more than 24 months ago, it didn't happen. Now, they ought to be held to account for this irresponsible tabloid reporting. Honestly, what I see every day in the media, people used to turn their noses up at 35 years ago. as being nothing but sensationalistic tabloid journalism. I used to have 2 laminated front pages from National Enquirer that I would use when I'd board our juries as a trial lawyer. One of them said, child born hybrid in a barnyard, half pig, half human. And they had a clearly airbrushed pig snout on this young child's face. Now, a year and a half later, this 9-month-old infant is supposedly 5 years old. And they had the same couple with now a 5-year-old perched on daddy's knee. And it said, loving couple having great success with half boy, half pig born in barnyard. And everybody on the jury used to laugh at it. But it was on the front page as a headline for the National Enquirer. Now that same kind of journalistic style is looked at as normal. We had last column, last page, the last section of the Times, LA Times, New York Times, Washington Post, you name it. It was called the gossip column. It was salacious, and only people of low character went and read it. But there were a number of people that could be counted on to read it, so they did have the gossip column for those who had low moral character and standards. Now that gossip column is first page material, first section, front page. And it is deplorable what's going on. I think a lot of it started with CNN, which was going into damn near bankruptcy at the end of the 1980s, and they got saved by Gulf War I when they found themselves just happened to be in place to watch a cruise missile flash past the 6th floor window of a reporter as it powered down a city street below the top level of the tall office buildings and made a sharp right at the end of the street to go on and hit a target. Well, people got used to this 24/7 stuff. And then when the Gulf War was over, the first one, there was nothing to cover. So you started getting them into opinion, speculation. You're looking at a burning log cabin. Well, Tommy, what do you think's going on? What do you think was the reasons log cabin got burned? I don't know, Al, but maybe it had something to do with, you think there may have been a fugitive in there? Well, Tommy, that sounds reasonable. Who do you think it might have been? Well, Al, I heard there was this rogue LAPD cop and some of his buddies were trying to help him out. Oh, let's see, Tommy, what was his name? So and so and so and so. And then you look at this smoldering cabin for 47 minutes and you haven't learned anything, but some idiots just babbled on. And that's how it got around to 24/7, not news, which might only take 15 minutes for the whole damn day, but you have to fill up 23 hours and 45 minutes outside of the commercial breaks with other nonsense. And this is the morphing of the news from public service information to mainstream entertainment, competing against more traditional entertainments for ratings. Now, we have gotten in a mess.
Okay, so it's Mr. Engagement and UFO, whichever one. I think it was Mr. Engagement.
Thanks for allowing me to speak. Hey Judge, what's up?
Now,
I'm doing blessed, man. As a young brother having his own 501c or whatever, nonprofit and stuff, I see a lot of people like Black Lives Matter and other entities and organizations, using like these tax exempt statuses and stuff to like cause harm to our community. What are ways that we can like hold these organizations accountable by their bylaws and their constitutions, because they're getting tax write-offs, they're getting pulls with the government and stuff of that nature, and they're not doing anything that's constructive for our community to push forth for equitable policies such as like reparations, such as like police accountability bills and etc. So like, what's your take on that, and what are ways that we can as a collective hem that up so that we won't be taken advantage of as a group of people?
Stay informed. Read all you can, and don't read from the same sources. Read what your so-called enemy is putting out. Read what people who disagree with you put out. That's why nations have intelligence operation to find out what the other side is. Be able to think like the other side. If you have a position that you are strongly in favor of, see, just for the exercise of the thing, if you can push the other side. That way you might find out weaknesses in your own position or strength in your own position. I used to do that with law students. In other words, I'd assign each half of the class one side in a case, and then on the day when they were supposed to argue it, I'd make them flip. They got upset, but I'd tell them, your job is not to be in favor of something. Your job is to understand something. So if you're going to understand it, you should be able to adequately argue both sides. And if you're going to argue one side, you have to be able to argue the other one in order to be strong in what you're doing. A lot of people don't get that, but that will keep you focused.
I want to say thank you for that bit of knowledge. I'm gonna definitely apply to it and see what I could do with my little Knights Club and stuff. So I want to say thank you for your time and addressing that question.
Good luck on that night. You got a nightclub?
Yeah, it's called the Negro Black Knights Heritage Club. It's dealing with preserving the lineage of Negro American people. I just got my EIN numbers on in February during Black History Month, but we all know it's Negro History Week for those that rep that Negro life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Congratulations.
Yes. Where are you located?
Thank you, Queen, Dana, and thank you, Judge, for that approval. I live out in Connecticut. We do have members internationally, not international, domestically throughout the United States. So what I've been looking at is like with the issue with the NAACP, with them speaking out on reparations and not supporting us and stuff. And you got people that's talking about a rise to boycott. I'm looking at it as like entities like my my club and such will rise up. Like I want us to take the place of these entities that are not supporting our community, you know, by their constitution and bylaws and etc. So instead of me like going off and suing these guys or whatever, how about build a competitive brand and just outbox them? Because obviously they ain't doing their job.
There you go.
All right, so I'm gonna go to UFO and Cartot, and then we're gonna go to another topic. But the speakers, you guys could stay up, and anybody want to request to come up. So UFO, then Cartot.
Hey, what's going on, Dana? Glad you got your stuff fixed, girl. Yeah, I know. I've been catching you on YouTube since we met that one the other time. Judge, you know, do you think there's ever going to come a day where they stop using the past, like a man's past, against them when it comes to like sexual acts or something like that? I mean, we're all, like you said, we're all people, and we all have that past. And I know in here we've had crazy conversations, me and Dana and you about all kinds of like things that people wouldn't normally talk about, you know, mouth love as you call it or whatever. And it just seems to be like whenever you get in power, they just dig anything they can find, and it always ends up being like to shame them for something they did in their past, or shame them for something everyone else has done, especially as a man and even as a woman. But you know, they keep trying to dig it up. Do you think we're ever going to get past that? Or is it just going to constantly be some type of political
it's something
like idea?
It's something new. Say, you have to deal with the fact that for the last 50 years, you've had a small, very small group of people who have essentially taken control of news media, entertainment, and now, to a great extent, politics. And they don't like sexuality between men and women. All right? They don't like the paradigm, the human breeding scheme, and they attack it. The law and society used to have things called manners, being cultured, being appropriate, acting with dignity. We have gotten completely away from that, and we have gotten into extremes where people aren't supposed to be human, and the people that are dictating what we're supposed to act like don't have the same drives that we have. They don't look at a woman and say, wow. They aren't women and don't look at men and say, wow. They go, ugh. And that said, they don't appreciate stuff. Now, I saw this not long ago at a function. This woman, who is one of those that says, ugh, grabbed this guy by the wrist and was trying to take him to a seat. And she says, come with me. I want you to sit over. And before she could point out which one of the several seats he was to sit in, somebody distracted her. So I'm looking at this. And the guy is standing up there kind of like, well, yeah, I'm standing here. Which one of these seats am I supposed to take? So he reached over and took his forefinger and tapped her above the wrist and said, excuse me, what? And she turned around and yelled at him, don't touch me. Now, she had just had him by the wrist and was literally almost dragging him, but left him standing. So he just tapped her. Excuse me. And she went off on him. And that kind of thing is bad, but that kind of thing is being encouraged today. And as a consequence, with the young people I'm running into, they don't get exposed to boys and girls 101A and B. They don't know how to talk to each other. They don't have any idea what this dance is that human males and females have been playing with each other since day one. And they come up with ideas that lack common sense, that lack accountability for humanity's foibles.
It's gotten weird to me, Judge. I was raised by a World War II veteran, and he took me to a grocery store when I was a kid. And if, like, let's say it's a mom walked in with her daughter or her son, he would say, "Oh, cute kids," and run up and pat the daughter on the head or whatever. And if I did that today, I'd be tackled and taken to jail immediately, just for appreciating children, for being kids and being glorious, God's gift to this earth.
Yeah,
and it's just gotten bastardized and twisted, in my opinion.
They do that with Joe Biden. If he hugs somebody, they think he's a predator. It's just crazy.
Well, let me say this about Joe Biden. I spoke in Delaware's downtown public library, Wilmington, Delaware. And there was a woman in there, grown woman, married, and she confided in me that when she was 15 years old, she sang at a country club. She did gospel, and her father was a preacher. And she said when she got through with it, Biden, who was then a U.S. Senator, walked up and hugged her and then stuck his hand under her dress and tried to squeeze her buttocks. She said she had to struggle to pull away, and she said nobody helped her, and she went into the ladies' room and vomited. Now, it may be a lie or it may be truthful, but that's what she told me. Now, that's an allegation. It wasn't under oath. Now, I agree with you, him doing what in Hollywood is this kissy thing they used to do, where everybody hugged all over everybody and did cheek kissing, and all of this other stuff was normal with them. I thought it was a little excessive and weird, but I don't know. They've changed that around. So if you sit there and I don't get it, because there's supposed to be equality between sexes now. Women touch each other to get their attention, and they touch guys to get their attention. But if the guy touches her, then everybody freaks out and claims molestation. So I think we've overdone it. And by the way, there is a move afoot in the law that I find absolutely preposterous. There is a trend where they're trying to create a new category of felony rape. It's called rape by seduction. In other words, if you agree to go out with somebody and the two of you go to a nice restaurant, you have a good dinner and you have wine and it's spring and you have a walk in the park, you're holding hands with each other and you both come to the conclusion that your place or mine, and you pick where you're going and you hug, kiss, pet, and wind up in the bed and have sex. That's supposed to be felony rape by seduction. What they think ought to happen is that you ought to say, hey, I feel like getting laid this Friday. If you're not doing anything, do you want to go off and have a nice dinner? And if everything works out, we can hit the sack. Oh, sure. I feel like getting screwed too. Let's go do that. So all the way through, you're supposed to say, okay, you still want to go to my place or yours, or let's flip coins. Okay, you still want to do this, and we're going to pet and everything else if that's all right with you. And then when you get ready to have sex, you're supposed to say, you sure you still want to do this? And then they say you're supposed to stop in the middle and say, do you want to keep going? And then you're supposed to ask for permission to finish. Now, somewhere in there, somebody has lost their minds, because that's not how humans do it. I mean, we're not talking rape here. We're not talking about drugging anybody here. We're not talking about getting somebody drunk here. We're just talking about being seductive and somebody saying, oh, I like that. Let's keep on keeping on. But that's supposed to be the new felony of rape. A new type of felony rape by seduction. And that's absolutely ridiculous.
Don't say the R word too much, because they're funny with that as well.
Saying we're going to get canceled.
But I know you're saying it in legal terms, but everything what you just explained, which is why they're like just so overly sensitive in a retarded way. So I want to go to Carla.
And by the way, I won't say the R word again, but when a jury is instructed in these things, when a jury is voir dired on such a case, it's a lot more graphic than what I just got through doing. And if you can do it inside a formal court of law on the record, and when you read the statutes that deal with it and the instructions to the jury, how in the devil are these clowns running these social media venues allowed to get away with what they're doing? And by the way, the excuse I hear, their private business, that doesn't wash, because we would have no civil rights today if that was the case, because mom and pop stores and small restaurants could say no colored allowed and get away with it. It's not. If it impacts interstate commerce, trade, or communications, then the rules apply. And if you start trying to deal with suppressing or oppressing speech that is otherwise lawful, then you're violating people's rights. And it doesn't make any difference whether you're private or public. You're subject to these things. And somebody needs to set up Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, you name it, for an action to get them declared public utilities, which is the same thing happened to the private utility companies 140 years ago.
All right, I want to go to Carlot, and then I want to bring in. I want to switch to the title of Memphis News, and then I'm gonna resume back to the speakers, and I'm gonna bring up another speaker, and then the speakers y'all can talk about the topics or topics we already talked about, or ask them a question. So you have the floor. car type. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was just raised my hand about the earlier topic on control of the media and how that it also affects social media with the sort of the really rapidly developing AI platforms we're seeing now. It's going to be much more personalized, and I don't even think we'll see a right and a left, so to speak, anymore. I think it's going to be much more highly personalized driven content that we are getting for our news. Um, so it'll be interesting to see how that pans out, as that evolves over time. As far as social media platforms, I'm with you, Judge. I kind of think we're at the point where we need to say, are we a utility? Is Twitter a utility, or is it a private business? If it's a utility, then we need to think about, well, how are our algorithms being used? How is the platform being used to drive what is frankly antagonistic behaviors, where it's trying to get reactions out of people, more clicks and so on, to drive dollars, drive revenue. So that, right now they're engineered to drive those kinds of clicks, and it's really creating a problem with sort of a lot of divided feelings and interactions. So we're getting to that point where we're going to have to decide as a society, if this is a utility, then we can't be allowing that type of control over the platform.
Well, let me ask you to consider this. You recall the case that went to the Supreme Court out of Colorado, where the cake maker who said it was against his principles to make a cake for a gay wedding, it went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, if you can snatch one private businessman in for allegedly infringing on some other person's rights, what do you think you can do with the tens of millions of people who are impacted by an entity like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram that have FCC licenses to use the limited frequencies available for radio transmission and be protected by the public and take advantage of the courts, the police, the regulatory agencies of the United States to which all these people pay taxes, and say that because they are a private business, they are exempt, whereas one man running a cake making business was not exempt from the application of the rights of two people who he didn't want to make a cake for.
Well, I personally think that if, as you say, we're subject to public oversight, the FCC and all that, and we need to, Twitter, when I say we, I mean Twitter, it is performing a public service in a sense, right? I mean, if Twitter went down completely, I mean, there would be probably a lot of, it'd be like kind of cable going down 100% or radio going away. There would be a huge gap in the way we communicate. So, in my opinion, we need to potentially think about it as a utility and regulate it accordingly. And that means freedom of speech, no government interference in what content you're showing. You might need some guardrails over, you can't show snuff films, you can't show things that might, be injurious to the public, right? The same as we do with our cable television shows and all that. But yeah, I don't know. That's just my 2 cents.
Well, I agree with you. It's always been my position that these things are public utilities. Also, there is some federal case law on it. It's quite recent. You remember a few years ago when Trump was blocking people that were bad mouthing his tweets, and they took him to federal court. And I think he did something very astute in not taking it up on appeal, but it got to the point of the initial federal appellate level. And they held it because what he was doing by simply restricting replies to his tweets, like as was permitted by Twitter, he could block them. That interfered with the First Amendment rights of other people who might want to respond. So when you read the logic in the cases, that sustains the point about the public utility thing. So right now, as it stands, the only federal appellate decisions involving is, say, it's a public utility, a public forum. It is the soapbox that people used to stand on to harangue the crowd in a public gathering, in a public place.
I'm going to unmute myself. All right. So I have Kimball and Black Authority. I'm going to have you guys speak, and then I want to switch to another topic, and then open the floor back up for the speakers, whoever want to request to come up. So go ahead, Kimball, and then after you, Black Authority.
Thanks, Judge. Thought I'd mix it up with a different kind of question. I want to know, what kind of music did you like in your 20s, and what kind of music do you like now?
Well, the music I liked in my 20s, for the most part, was Motown or Stax. And it's still the same music I hear in elevators right now. And actually, after 50-some years, it's gotten kind of boring. Now, I find something I'm greatly disappointed in. My parents couldn't get with the music that I liked. They couldn't get with the music their parents or my grandparents liked. But nowadays, I walk into a nightclub, and I'm doing that campaigning. You have people in there 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years old, and they're listening to the same music that's been around for the last 35, 40 years, essentially unchanged. The lyrics may have gotten a little raunchier, but it's basically the same. So the question I'd have to ask the younger generations is, why have you let music stagnate so much, whereas for the last part or most of the 20th century, a type of music lasted as a popular thing for maybe 5 to 10 years. So why has it gone on 40 now? And what do I like?
I think
to now? I'm listening to the exact same thing I listened to before, because other than there being less singing and more talking / rapping to remix of some old stuff, I'm hearing the same thing that I did when I was in my 20s 50 years ago.
it's called sampling.
Sampling.
Yeah, they do a lot of sampling.
Yeah, well, sampling, that's too. I heard somebody talking about sampling the other day, and I said, well, that was from 1959, for goodness sakes. And by the way, 20-some years ago, 24, 20 years ago, 23, 25 years ago, I had a big financial interest in a recording studio here in Memphis known as Verbally Toxic. What we did is, when some of the major actors had contracted with another studio to get something done, and that studio fouled it up, we could usually correct things within 24 to 48 hours on an emergency basis and do some unorthodox stuff on the side. But I had to bail on that one. But
I would say too, a lot of music classes have been taken out of the schools. A lot of new artists don't play instruments, and that's vital when it comes to creating music as well. So yeah, but it is a difference. I want to go to Black Authority, and then we're going to switch it to Memphis and Florida. Go ahead, Black Authority.
Hello, Ms. Dana. Hello, Judge Joe Brown. Thanks for allowing me to speak.
Hey.
I only came up because, the person was laughing during Judge Joe Brown relating the story of Wilmington, and I'm actually moving to Wilmington very soon. And I was really I was shocked, to be honest, but I guess I shouldn't be shocked, because during my research as to what was occurring with Black women during our enslavement is that her property was sitting right there, watching, witnessing, and even giving directions to the rape of Black women during that time period. And so I was really just thrown back. I've watched so many of those videos. His own son has him in his phone as Pedo Pete, the sniffer in chief. It is undeniable. I just didn't understand why someone would conflate a story about touching a child in a grocery store and then bring up that man's name. The fact that he is still the president of the United States to me is criminal. And it just shows the blindness of someone who follows a political party and will sacrifice children, the innocence of children in the process. I just found it disgusting. Thank you.
Did you want to comment to that?
No, it's called res ipsa loquitur. It speaks for itself.
Don't judge him, Joe Brown.